In the past 60 seconds, nearly 7 million emojis have been shared worldwide, and over 10 billion in the last 24 hours. But when was the first emoji ever sent? What was the first emoji, and what does any of that have to do with this little device? Today we're going to find out on Vintage Geek. Just a quick reminder, if you like vintage technology and cool gadgets like the one we're covering today, be sure to like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we grow, and I encourage you to become a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website at vintagegeek.com. Before we can jump into the history of all of this, we need to define something. What exactly is an emoji? If you Google the definition, emojis are a simple digital image or icon used to convey an emotion or feeling. That's pretty easy to understand. Now, that's not to be confused with the emoticon. The emoticon is actually a combination of keyboard characters used to convey an emotion via the use of a face or something that looks like a face. You might see a colon followed by a dash and then a right parenthesis to make a smiley face. According to the Wired Guide to the Emoji that was published in 2018, everything really started with these emoticons. People were using them in online chat rooms and kind of that early web, things that we don't really think about today, but that's how people were communicating back then. Wired goes on to say that the first emoji was created by a Japanese artist back in 1999, and he created the first set of emojis as we know them today. Kurita was on the development team for a project called iMode, which was part of an early web startup in Japan. And his whole idea was to be able to convey emotions in a very simple and easy way that could be conveyed over an electronic means. But in all of this, did Wired magazine actually get the story right? To find out, we need to go a little further back in history to the late 1960s. It was during this time that the scientific community had largely recognized that electronic devices could be very useful in the classroom environment. And film strips became very popular at this time as well. With a film strip, a teacher could show their class a lot of visual representations of things as well as audio narration through records or even tapes later on. It was also during this time that companies got very creative with how they presented things to the classroom, both visually and audibly. Companies like Borg-Warner came out with something called the System 80. The System 80 combined technologies that were available at the time for a very interesting result. Essentially, the way the System 80 worked was that it took vinyl records in the top slot. Along with the vinyl record, you would also insert a film strip/punch card into the front of the machine. This would give the machine instructions on how to proceed with the lesson. The interesting thing about all of this is that the two components would work together to basically give the student an interactive experience of some kind, where they would see something on the screen, they would hear the narration and possibly questions about it, and then would be prompted to answer those questions before the program would go on. So this took things to the next level of interactivity. But at the end of the day, all of this was still using analog technology. To this point, no one had come up with a truly digital system for the classroom, but it wouldn't be long. In 1971, Intel came out with the first microprocessor, the 4004. Now, the 4004 was about the size of a thumbnail, and it contained over 2,300 transistors. It basically had the computing power of the large mainframe-type computers that were in the 1940s, all in the size of a fingertip. It was an amazing piece of technology, and two young inventors from Sunnyvale, California, took advantage of that. Their names were Jerome C. Meyer and James A. Tillotson, and they came up with a patent for a new kind of teaching device, one that could randomly generate problems and be able to analyze the answers to assess whether the students would be able to continue on with the lesson. And that's where we come to a company called Centurion.
Did somebody say Centurion?
No, not that Centurion.
Oh.
This was a company called Centurion Industries out of Redwood City, California. In 1974, Centurion Industries combined the ideas in the patent with the technology that was now available with the Intel 4004 to create the world's first microprocessor-based educational teaching device called the Digitor. We have one here in the Vintage Geek Museum. Now, they did have one unique problem in creating the Digitor. How would you tell students instantly whether they got a question right or wrong? What was the easiest way to convey that? Well, let's find out firsthand and try out the Digitor right here on Vintage Geek. At first glance, the Digitor is just an inherently cool-looking device. It looks like it's straight out of NASA from the 1960s. This thing looks like it could actually land on the moon. It's got these legs that come out here. I love the way that the entire electronics of this device are contained in basically a sphere. It's just a really interesting design concept, and I wonder if the people that were involved in it were basically trying to appeal to the kids in the classroom, because I would imagine that kids at the time would flock to something like this just just looking so different and unique. On the sides of the unit, there are these two larger black knobs. Now, I don't know exactly how these work. Unfortunately, with our Digitor, we did not get an original copy of a manual, but as I understand it, one of the knobs is going to determine the difficulty of the problems at hand, and the other knob is going to determine how many problems you do in a particular set before it gives you the final score. There's kind of this cover over the unit that slides back, which is really cool, and that's how we're going to be able to get inside and actually use the device. Now that we have the cover open, let's turn on the Digitor. There's a switch in the back of the unit. Turn that on, and we've got an equal sign right away here. Again, I'm not sure how to use this. Actually looked like I went through some kind of initialization routine there. I saw some lights flash. So let's see if we can make this do something. I assume we're gonna have to pick first what kind of math function we wanna work on. Let's just start with addition. I'm gonna hit the plus key here. We do have a plus showing up, that's great. Now, as far as the knobs go, I'm gonna go ahead and leave these on the lowest setting. So we've got 0 to 3 on the left knob, and we've got 10 on the right. Now, I'm not sure if that means that we're gonna have 10 problems in total, but let's find out. If I hit the G key, I think that means generate the problem. And it did generate a problem, 9 plus 0. All right, so let me go ahead and get the answer right and see what that does first. 9. Oh, wow. And we've got instant feedback here. It's telling me I got the answer right, and there's a nice smiley face with this green flashing logo on it that says right. It's a little bit dim, but definitely gets the point across, and I can see where a kid would be pretty excited about that. Now let's see what happens if we get one wrong. 8 plus 2, we'll just put in 8. Oh no. That is quite the wrong icon there, and definitely brighter than the green icon for getting it right. I'm not sure what's going on with this frowny face here. It looks like the eyes are X'd out, which is a little bit interesting, but it also looks like it's using the math symbols in the icon itself, which is really cool. You've got the plus sign, multiplication, the divide symbol as the nose. So I like that. That's a very clever way of using the symbols in the actual icon there. So very cool. That was problem number 2. So if I go ahead and hit the G again here, it's going to give me the same problem. So it's wanting me to get this right. So let's put in the correct answer. Got that one right. Awesome. Plus 0 is 8. 7 plus 0, 7. It's very fast and very responsive for such an early device. This one is 9. Right again. We got 9 again. Interestingly, the 1 plus 1 equation is not making the right light flash. So not sure if there's a difference there or if that's just an anomaly. Well, back to flashing. Okay, so there was the 10 problems, so this knob does control the amount of problems in total, and it looks like we got 9 out of the 10 right initially, because there was the one that we got wrong and then got it right on the second try. So the machine is actually keeping score along the way, which is really cool, and it's really neat how this kind of works in general. Now, I'm not sure about the left-hand knob. Maybe we should try to adjust that and see if we get a difference. We move this from 0 to 3 to 4 to 6, and then we hit generate again. All right, so now we've got 8 plus 4. Oh, apparently I must have hit the 1 key a little bit too hard there. Let's try it again. Oh, that 1 key is sticking a little bit. It keeps wanting to put in 11. There we go. So I'm guessing that this is the difficulty level on the left-hand side. We're seeing a lot more double-digit answers now than we did in the first round. I assume that that would go up more as you kind of dial this in. I'm actually not sure if these numbers on the left represent something like age range or even grade level. It doesn't seem to really make sense, although, well, I guess 7th to 9th grade. That would have to be some fairly complex problems. I'm not sure if this device could actually support that or not. I believe that I read that it's only capable of doing double digits. I don't think it can actually get into the 3-digit answers. At least looking at the display and the characters available, it would seem that would be the case. Let's see how the device would do with something like multiplication. So we'll reset it. I go to multiply. Okay. 2 times 5. 10. All right. 0. It handles the 2-digit answers quite well, other than the fact that some of the keys have that kind of debounce problem where they'll actually hit more than once if you're not careful. It's probably just due to age, though. Oops, the 1 key especially does that a lot. You have to use kind of a light touch. Oh, keeps wanting to put in the 1 twice. There we go. Again, I don't know the correlation between the flashing right indicator versus the solid one, or if that's just random. Again, we got 9 problems right in multiplication. Let's see what happens if we dial this up to 7 to 9. I'm just curious as to what happens with the difficulty. And let's do division. Oh yeah, this is definitely getting into the higher difficulty problems. 40 divided by 8. Okay, great. 9. I really like how clear the display is on this. It's very easy to read. I don't think this would be a problem for kids at all. Most of the time I'm good at math. So 8 problems right in the division section. The other funny thing about these adjustment knobs on the sides is that they have an entire section that's just labeled as non-functional, which is really funny. I guess they just had the full rotation of the switches inside, but they really only needed a certain number of them. So that's a clever way of doing it. But I suppose that takes up a lot less real estate in the unit than trying to put that into some kind of slide switches or some kind of push button system. So I can see why they would do that. And it really does add to the overall aesthetic and design of the unit, kind of keeping with that space age feel. Overall, this is very cool though, and it's a great working device for a device of its age, considering this came out in 1974. From what I can tell, it's still behaving exactly as it did when it was new, minus that little bit of bounce in the number 1 key. Just a really cool device overall. According to our research, the Digitor sold approximately 100,000 units, and it was only sold to schools directly, not to consumers in general until much later. The company, Centurion Industries, went on to make different versions of the Digitor in later years. In fact, they actually made one called the Alphator that did word problems and drill instruction for students. We don't really know for sure if the 100,000 total units included those later models or if that was just the original 1974 that we have here in the museum. Perhaps we'll never know, but if you know anything about the Digitor or about the original company that created it, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Over time, devices like the Digitor became obsolete as more modern computers took over the scene in the classrooms and did more and more advanced things with students. But going back to the original question, was Wired magazine right about the first use of the emoji? If you look at this in the technical definition, the Digitor does use icons that express an idea or a feeling. So I would say, in that sense, yes. Now you could argue on one hand that it's not truly a digital icon, but it's on a digital device that was actually the first of its kind. Whether you think it's the first emoji or not, the Digitor deserves a special place in history, and definitely a special place here at Vintage Geek. Thanks for watching. If you like vintage technology, vintage gadgets like the Digitor, be sure to like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we grow here at Vintage Geek, and I would encourage you to become a member. You can do that at our website at vintagegeek.com. We've got extra video content, code snippets, and of course discounts if you'd like to come to the museum. Again, that's at vintagegeek.com. Until next time, I'm Aaron, this is the Digitor, and this is Vintage Geek. Let's take a look at how this would do with something like multiplication. So let's see how the device would do with something like multiplication.